Welcome to Game of Roses. I'm Chad Kultgen. Two astounding articles have come out in Deadline in the past 2 days, essentially outlining some massive problems that the Bachelor franchise is having. This does not look good for the franchise as a whole. I'm going to read through every word of both of them right now and see what we can learn. The first one came out yesterday. This is by Peter White, who covers reality TV and television generally for Deadline. The headline of this is The Bachelor Nation: majority of crew exits following the Bachelorette pause. Exclusive, a large group of crew members have been let go from the Bachelor universe as a result of the Bachelorette's recent postponement. Deadline revealed earlier this month that the Bachelorette would not air in its traditional summer slot, essentially skipping a cycle. This inevitably has had major impact on the production crew working across these shows. Deadline understands that the majority of the crew members were informed last week that they would no longer be employed on the franchise. It's a move that has caused shockwaves among the hundreds of crew who work on the various shows. It's not clear how many people were impacted. Just for context, if you get a job on the crew or really as any part of a show like The Bachelor that has been on the air for 20 plus years, it's kind of a gift in the entertainment industry. Almost no show lasts that long, but it does become this thing where you're part of this, almost a family of people who knows that they're going to have regular employment in the entertainment industry on this show. And the fact that they're having to cut massive amounts of crew is just definitely not a good sign. Staffers currently still working on The Bachelor, including on the specials that follow a season of the flagship show, will continue until their responsibilities end. So that's essentially until after the final rose of Grant Ellis's season 29, which is going to be coming up in about a month and a half. Bachelor in Paradise, which will see Scott Teddy serve as a new showrunner. We did a whole piece on him, who he is, and what we think he might bring to the franchise, maybe like a month ago in our This Week in Bachelor Nation. Check that out if you want. That is up next for ABC in the Bachelor universe and will shoot in the summer. Paradise, which generally is filmed in Mexico, often has different crew members than other shows, but there is some overlap. And there's also rumors now that it's not going to be shooting in Mexico. It could be anywhere else in the world. Some staff, of course, might return to the franchise once it gets back up and running on the next season of The Bachelor, which likely would start production later this year, or on new seasons of The Golden Bachelor or The Golden Bachelorette. Supposedly, The Golden Bachelor is going forward this season, so at least from the other article that we read about The Bachelorette being canceled this year, the Bachelor in Paradise Season 10 is going to be the next Bachelor product we see sometime in the summer, and then Golden Bachelor Season 2 will likely air after that, to be shot sometime in late summer or early fall, I would guess. The Bachelorette was set to start filming shortly for its 22nd season before it was paused. Bachelor in Paradise, which has premiered in its last two seasons at the end of September, is next on the docket and will likely start production over the summer. All of this comes as season 29 of The Bachelor, starring Grant Ellis, is currently airing on ABC. The Bachelor universe is produced by Warner Brothers Unscripted Television in association with Warner Horizon. Warner Brothers TV declined to comment. So they have axed, I don't know the number here, but this is not good. Majority of crew exits following the Bachelorette pause. So that means they're keeping on a skeleton crew to finish any kind of last minute edits they need to do for Grant Ellis's season. And like they're saying, the in quotes specials. So they still haven't shot the Women Tell All for Grant's season. I believe that's coming up in the next few weeks. And they obviously still haven't shot the live after the final rose. That'll come up at the end of his season. Then those people, whoever they are that are still working on this, I can only assume will also be dismissed because Golden Bachelor has a slightly different production crew and even producer crew than the regular Bachelor or Bachelorette. So this is not a great sign. It means that there is no certainty about your job in the Bachelor franchise, no matter how long you've been on the show, no matter which one of the shows you were on. I mean, Bachelorette is one of the linchpins in this cycle of content. So that's the first bad news. They have fired... Again, this Deadline article says a majority of the crew. That means over half of the Bachelor crew who has in one capacity or another worked on this show for over 20 years, gone. Thank you very much for your time and your service. Now let's move on to this next article. The Bachelor, inside the toxic culture of the Bachelor franchise as crew deals with fallout of Bachelorette pause, extent of EP exits revealed. This is from today, also by Peter White. Let's check this one out. This one seems worse to me. The firings are bad. I mean, anytime you lose or you tell your entire crew of a TV show, like, been nice knowing you, good luck out there in the big wide world, it's just a very bad sign for that show. And in this case, because there are multiple shows that make up this franchise, I think it's a very bad sign for Bachelor as a franchise. So here we go. Let's get into this. Exclusive. Jen Tran, star of the last season of The Bachelorette, was in tears, her mother sitting yards away as she watched footage of her proposing to Devin Strader on ABC's After the Final Rose live finale. I love that he puts this as the first little paragraph, because that moment, in my opinion, is the end of this franchise. It is when it all starts to crumble in a very real way. There were cracks in the dam leading up to this, and I could spend an hour talking about this, going all the way back to what I perceive to be the real first move in a negative direction for this franchise, which was in season 18 of The Bachelor back in 2014. After the franchise had just come off its two most successful seasons in history, with Sean Lowe in Bachelor season 17. He is still married to his ring winner, Catherine Giudice. They have children, and everything's going great there. The Bachelorette that came out of his season was Desiree Hartsock, now Desiree Siegfried, still married to her ring winner, and they have kids. So that year, 2013, was the most successful in terms of proof of premise, and ratings and stuff were huge too. The very next year, in 2014, we see Juan Pablo Galavis as the first villain bachelor, where the producers actually cut him to be a villain. They angle him that way. They present him that way. And that was the first time in franchise history the show itself turned against a lead. From that moment forward, that's all that's been happening. And we are now arrived at this moment, which is the opening paragraph, again, of this article, where Jen Tran is not only turned against by the producers, they malevolently make a decision to force her to have a nervous breakdown on stage while watching back the most traumatic moment of her season, after she had already done this hot seat with Devin Strader and was already sobbing. It was just an unnecessary twisting of the knife, a creative decision that I think destroyed the franchise in one way or another. Made by, we don't know exactly who, but it was one of the executive producers who they brought on to, change the show radically. One of the executive producers who was in that LA Times article saying they have their leads backs. Let us assure you, it was one of those people who made that decision. Again, we don't know who it was, but all of those people are still there, still running the ship, even though they're running it straight into an iceberg, as it were. Let's continue here. The engagement hadn't worked out and was over before Tran was forced to relive that day along Strader. It was a decision that former Bachelor star Ben Higgins called cruel and unnecessary. He's correct. Do I have a choice? Tran asked host Jesse Palmer as he teed up the footage. It seems she didn't. This is a perfectly written entree, assuming this article is essentially talking about the end of The Bachelor. This moment is exactly what ended it, in my opinion. And whoever made that decision shouldn't be allowed to be making this TV show anymore, because it's so detrimental to the fan base, which is what keeps this show going. I can't tell you the amount of DMs I had from people after this exact moment took place in Jen Tran's After the Final Rose, that people just DM'd me and said, sorry, I can't watch this show anymore. They ruined it. All right, let's continue. The decision to air the footage was made. Oh, here we go. We're getting the actual ins and outs of it. This is fantastic. The decision to air the footage was made by Claire Freeland, who serves as showrunner, executive producer of the Bachelor franchise along Bennett Graebner. Claire made that decision to put her in that position and air that proposal on live television, one former producer said. Producers were screaming at them in the booth to stop and were ignored. They said she was falling apart. You know why Freeland did it? Because it was her idea, the producer said. Oh my God. Warner Brothers TV, which produces the show via its Warner Brothers Unscripted Television and Warner Horizon divisions, denies this allegation and said the studio network and Tran agreed with the plan. I don't know if that's true. Somebody made this decision and said, let's do it. I can only assume this decision was kind of made on the fly. They're shooting that After the Final Rose live. It's not like this was, even if they had kind of pre-planned it, they still are watching Jen Tran in real time on that stage, breaking down, sobbing, and they decide to either go through with the plan that they already had in place, or maybe this was a game time decision. They were like, no, make her watch it. That'll really get her crying. And no matter what the case was, whether it was pre-planned and they went ahead with it or it was a game time decision, the outcome of it was it made the show itself, the producers, look completely malicious, like they did not care about Jen Tran. In fact, the opposite, that they cared about destroying her for what they call drama or good TV or ratings. This is fascinating to know that it was Claire Freeland, because Claire Freeland, to my knowledge, was brought in from the Canadian Bachelor specifically to have the backs of the leads. And if this was her decision, she's doing the exact opposite of what she was brought in to do in this franchise. Let's continue. Tran's story highlights the current behind-the-scenes state of Bachelor Nation, which came to a head earlier last week when the majority of production staff were axed as a result of ABC and Warner Bros. TV's decision to pause The Bachelorette. Speaking with Deadline primarily prior to the layoffs, described by one source as a bloodbath, a dozen current and former crew members claim that Freeland and Graebner have run a toxic and hostile environment where only their ideas are accepted and others are warned to step in line or else be asked to leave. Freeland and Graebner deny these allegations. I can simply say this. From everything I've heard behind the scenes, this is 100% accurate. There are essentially two factions of producers within the Bachelor franchise. One is this old school Bennett Graebner and Claire Freeland faction that is like it's our way or the highway, and we run this show with an iron fist, and the whole show is about us having complete control over the players and crushing them into submission. Meanwhile, there is a younger tier of producers who has come up through this system that understands the current temperature of reality television and what changes need to be made in the Bachelor franchise to keep it contemporary, to keep it in any way relevant in the face of shows like Love is Blind, Love Island, all these kind of newer shows that are really redefining what a reality TV dating format should be and can be in the year 2025. And so clearly what we're reading here is that younger faction of producers within the Bachelor producerial tier has no footing. It's Claire Freeland and it's Bennett Graebner saying, this is what we're doing. And in many cases, you can see the evidence of what they're doing right on the screen. Not a lot changes in the Bachelor franchise. And this idea that, in quotes, good TV comes from the drama of people fighting and having nervous breakdowns is just so baked into the culture of these old school producers that it has now essentially destroyed everything that we're seeing in the Bachelor franchise. Wow, this is crazy. I can't believe that they have this information. Let's continue. Quote, my clients are well-respected professionals with a long history in this business. They are frankly stunned and saddened by some of the things they're hearing now for the first time. Michael Weinstein, counsel for Claire Freeland and Bennett Graebner, told Deadline in a statement. Well, of course, anyone who gets accused of any kind of bad behavior at a workplace, especially an entertainment workplace, their lawyer is going to come out and say, like, this is all bullshit. They didn't know anything about it. We have no idea what you're talking about. They're great. Everyone loves them. But clearly that's not the case. The Bachelor universe, which is responsible for around 700 episodes of television since Alex Michel became the first to search for love on the show in 2002, March 25th, 2002, let's be very specific, has seen its fair share of controversies in its 20 plus years on air. Let's see which ones they highlight, if any. It has previously been criticized for lack of racial diversity. Longtime host Chris Harrison stepped down after comments he made regarding contestant Rachel Kirkconnell's appearance at an antebellum plantation-themed fraternity formal. Bachelor in Paradise. Okay, so they don't get into the details of exactly what that is. Those comments he made were made to Rachel Lindsay, the first black lead of the show. She was Bachelorette back in season 13, and she was at the time of Matt James's season 25, which is when Chris Harrison made these comments. She was on-camera talent for Extra. She did the interview with Chris Harrison after all of this stuff happened with Rachel Kirkconnell that people online, essentially Reddit, found these pictures of her at these antebellum balls. She was lined up. She was going, I believe, into the final four when that news broke of Matt James's season. And so they sent Chris Harrison out to do damage control, and he just dug the hole deeper. And that is what ultimately led to his dismissal from the franchise. Let's read on. Bachelor in Paradise had to halt production on season 4 due to allegations of misconduct during filming. Former segment producer Becky Steenhawk sued producers for sexual harassment, and creator Mike Fleiss exited in 2023 after an investigation over workplace misconduct allegations. Fleiss has never publicly commented on the investigation. So whatever. It's an article. They're hitting the highlights, but they're not getting into the details of any of this. That Bachelor in Paradise production halt was due to Corinne Olympios and Demario Jackson. I guess they both were at the time inebriated. They had, some chemistry play in a swimming pool, and a producer saw it and thought that there was sexual assault happening. Both Corinne and Demario have said since that is not the case. Nonetheless, once a producer makes that allegation, Warner Brothers is then obligated to halt all production, do an investigation, which they did. They came back and resumed production of that season a few weeks later, and they made all the remaining players go on camera and essentially give their consent to continue to be there during that season. It was one of the most chilling and cringe-worthy moments maybe in the history of Bachelor. And of course then Mike Fleiss being ousted just before Charity Lawson season. His kind of final decision, or I should say the first decision he didn't get to make, was who the Bachelorette was going to be for that season 20. It wound up being Charity Lawson. He wanted someone different. But after he was fired, there was also kind of a minor house cleaning done by Warner Brothers to try to root out all of the Mike Fleiss loyalists in the production tiers. Clearly, or I don't know. I don't know if Claire Freeland and Bennett Graebner are Fleiss loyalists, but they seem to at least come from the same school of producing that he did. Okay, so let me continue here. Sorry. But it seems controversy hasn't left the rose ceremony. Following Fleiss's exit, the show elevated 3 people to run the franchise. Freeland, who had previously run The Bachelor in Canada, Graebner, who had worked on the franchise since 2008, and Jason Ehrlich, who has been involved in the show for over 20 years. The hope was that the trio could usher in a new phase for the reality universe to move forward after the ignominy of its creator's sudden exit. A trio of other executive producers, Nicole Woods, Peter Geist, and Louis Carrick, who oversaw the franchise on a day-to-day basis, also departed after Freeland, Graebner, and Ehrlich took over. There are stories about at least Louis Carrick that you can Google around and find about him. But all of these people were high level. Nicole Woods and Peter Geist as well. They were all the people who are dealing directly with your leads, who are like really shaping the narrative of whatever the story is going to be each season. They're the ones who are singling out, this is going to be our villain. This is going to be our fool. This is going to be, whatever the role might be that they needed a player to step into. These were the people making those decisions. Woods and Carrick, who both spent more than 15 years working on the franchise, are understood to have left after season 9 of Bachelor in Paradise, which premiered in September 2023. That season was its most recent last season. Obviously, they took a year off after season 9 because it was so disastrous. And that season, to me, of Bachelor in Paradise, there's nothing more emblematic of producer overreach, where they forced multiple couples in the end of that season to get engaged and then stay quiet about it from the time they finished shooting to literally, it was like 3 business days after the airing of the finale. Every one of those couples that was engaged that season issued their amicable split Instagram posts. And you're just like, well, this is all bullshit. The producers are forcing them to do this. It was crystal clear that was the case. They're not letting the players play in these situations. They're forcing narratives. And that has been the way this show has been made for a very long time. But when you see something like a Love Island season 6, USA, and you watch like the circumstance, and you kind of set up the game. But when you let the players play, you get phenomenal seasons. And I think the Bachelor franchise has never really understood that. These people who are at the top of the pyramid there on the producerial chain all feel like they have to control everything. And if it's not exactly how they want it to be done, they will eliminate players from the game. Sorry, where was I? At the time of their departure, they are understood to have engaged lawyer Brian Friedman, who previously negotiated Chris Harrison's exit from the show. Friedman did not respond to deadline. So that Chris Harrison's exit from the show, he got paid $9 million essentially to shut up and say nothing about where the bodies are buried because he knows where they're all buried when he got ousted. Geist, who spent over 10 years on the franchise, starting with Bachelor Pad in 2012, left after season 20 of The Bachelorette, which premiered in June 2023. These departures have previously not been made public. Meanwhile, the troika of Freeland, Graebner, and Ehrlich didn't last long. Deadline understands that Ehrlich left after overseeing The Golden Bachelor, which culminated with its wedding episode in January 2024. And then obviously we know that Golden God Gary and Teresa Nest, his ring winner, got divorced like 2 months later or whatever. Subsequently, sources have told Deadline that Freeland and Graebner have run the franchise with fear. Members of the crew have recounted incidents of verbal and mental abuse, mind games, and a lack of communication from the show's remaining leaders. Quote, when Mike Fleiss left, there was a sigh of relief. Never did we think that 2 of the people that would take over would make us wish that he was still here, one crew member told Deadline. Jesus! Oh, that's not good. Warner Brothers Television Group is currently looking at complaints it has received since Deadline first made inquiries about production of the franchise. A spokesperson told Deadline, quote, we take a healthy workplace culture and safe production environment incredibly seriously. The show's been being made for over 20 years, and now this is just coming to light. That's kind of hard to believe for me, which is why in recent years we've made meaningful improvements to our on-set policies and practices. But we did, again, let it go on for over 20 years. We are committed, in conjunction with ABC, to continue evolving the way the Bachelor franchise productions operate, blah, 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 so our employees, cast can feel comfortable and heard. That is all lies. They don't care. The only thing that Warner Brothers and ABC care about is that dollar. If the ratings of this show are bad, things will be changed. And I think that's why this stuff is happening now. It appears to me, we still have a lot more of this article to go, but let me just say this. It appears to me so far from this article that what is happening is the ratings of this show are not good. Joan Vassos's Golden Bachelorette season, which is the last thing we saw in this franchise lineup before Grant Ellis's Bachelor season 29, which is currently airing, that show tanked. It was the worst rated Bachelor product in the history of the franchise, including Listen to Your Heart. Right now, Grant's season is not doing well. The ratings for last week were, well, actually for this most recent week, they kind of ticked up. He had a 0.45, I believe, in the 18 to 45-year-old demo. That was enough to get second place overall behind, I think it was NBC's The Voice, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's accurate. They got beat by some show pretty badly, but they did get second place this past week. Prior to that, the week before, dead last among the 4 major networks, and that is not good. Bachelor doesn't usually do that, as network ratings are declining year after year for sure because of streaming and a lot of other things. You do see these kind of low ratings, but Bachelor has predominantly won every Monday night, even with these declining ratings. And now we're seeing with Grant's season, he's struggling to even get into the top of the Monday night slots. And Joan Vassos, I don't think she ever won it. Maybe night 1 she did, and then it was just a bloodbath after that. So let's continue on. Where was I? Warner Brothers Television Group is currently looking. Okay, no, I read that one. Sorry. Days after Deadline revealed that The Bachelorette would skip its summer cycle, came another bombshell moment for staffers. On February 12th, staff assigned to work on The Bachelorette were told that they wouldn't be returning to the franchise, news that caused shockwaves through the crew. It's not clear exactly how many were impacted, but these shows generally have crew north of 200 people. Staff that are currently still working on The Bachelor, including on the specials that follow a season of the flagship show, will continue until their responsibilities end. Some staff may, of course, return to the franchise. So we already kind of read the article that said that. Meanwhile, Bachelor in Paradise will have a majority new crew. This is good, actually, when it goes into production later this year under the leadership of a new showrunner, Scott Teddy. Paradise, which shoots in Mexico, has traditionally had similar crew to The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, apart from 3 to 4 people, one source said. But some had already been informed before this that they may not be asked back, including Ken Fuchs. Oh my God. He's directed the show since the first episode, who has directed hundreds of hours of the Bachelor franchise. Warner Brothers TV insiders, however, insist that Fuchs, who is directing the Bachelor's Women Tell All special next month, remains an active part of the franchise. You know, I mean, I will say, I don't necessarily mind getting rid of Ken Fuchs. I mean, he's given everything to this franchise. He has determined the look of it for so long. And now I think we're starting to see this a little bit in Grant's season with the last week's episode. They did this little editing kind of package where they had these kind of moving windows and some film grain and some shots superimposed over each other to kind of like make it fun, is what it seemed like. And I thought it fell flat. I thought it was a bad look, especially when you're comparing it to more contemporary shows like Love Island or Love is Blind or Too Hot to Handle that have these incredible graphics packages, and the editors on those shows should be getting Emmys, especially Love Island. You're like watching an hour-long music video that never misses a beat. And to watch The Bachelor try to keep up with these shows at this point with somebody who may be determining what the show looks like that is a little out of touch, it's kind of hard. I think if they got some new blood in there, that might actually benefit the show. The last 2 years, but particularly in the last 6 months, have just been incredibly hostile, toxic, and horrible, one crew member told Deadline. It's a dumpster fire right now. Added another. You never want to be involved with anything called a dumpster fire. That much I know. Some of the departures have been down to budgetary issues. As with all long-running unscripted shows, costs are being cut, and that has an effect on staffing. But staffers suggest that there's more to this than just money. Sources have said that showrunners Freeland and Graebner have passive-aggressively criticized the work of people who have produced the show for many years and have ignored senior members of the production team. They sit behind their, quote, they sit behind their closed doors. They don't walk around the office. They don't talk to people. When they're on set, they sit with each other. They don't talk to the staff. It's bizarre. I've never seen such horrendous leadership, another former producer told Deadline. The most surprising thing of all is the silent toxicity, added another crew member. Everyone thought it was just happening in their department. And it was only a few months ago when we realized it's happening to all of us. There's also the suggestion that if workers don't, in quote, step in line, they will be let go. And crew members said the feeling was that they should just be grateful for working at a time when getting another job is difficult. That's rough. They want to push people to the extreme so that they can bring in their own regime, one source said. That's interesting. They don't outrightly treat people poorly. It's not obvious, added another source. They don't scream at people. It's more that everything they do is secretive and passive-aggressive, and they know that they're doing it to affect people. Jesus, this is intense. A third source said that Freeland and Graebner come late to every meeting because they want to keep people waiting. This is a time-honored tradition of assholes in Hollywood. to never show up to a meeting on time, so that whoever does show up on time is sitting there waiting, and the person who comes in late is in the perceived power position. They have this weird language between the two of them. There's no collaboration, no direction. They sit behind closed doors. People are being excommunicated from meetings that they've been in for 20 plus years. It's hard to explain because they're not screaming, the source added. Freeland and Gravener's counsel, Weinstein, said, to be clear, in the 2 years they have been running the Bachelor franchise, no one has ever complained to them or even implied that they were being anything other than professional. The fact is, they were tasked specifically to change the creative direction of the franchise, which they have not done, in my opinion. Change doesn't come easy, and as always, when there is change, some will be resistant and have a desire to return to old ways and old patterns. Clearly, some of the individuals have struggled to grasp the new direction, and in the process have misinterpreted my clients' good intentions. After Fleiss' okay, Jesus, this article is super long. It's so juicy, though. So what they're saying here, like, they've been tasked with changing the direction, and there's going to be some changes. I don't think this article gets written unless ABC and Warner Brothers are not happy with the performance of the show, and therefore not happy with the decision they made to bring in these producers to oversee the new version of whatever this franchise is about to become. I think this article only is allowed to be written if the powers that be, I'm talking about ABC and Warner Brothers, want Freeland and Gravener gone. After Fleiss' departure, like, I think they will use this article and this kind of, transition, this position being taken by the fandom by proxy almost through this article, that you guys can't be in charge of the show anymore. Sorry. After Fleiss' departure, Warner Horizon implemented new procedures and standards of conduct for the franchise. One studio insider said that many entrenched crew members preferred the status quo and voiced objections to change, blaming the producers for new policies put in place by the studio. The source added that various crew members have been, quote, disgruntled and felt that they should have been hired for the showrunner role instead of bringing in someone from the outside. Interesting. That's hard to say because you don't know what every one of these people's attitudes are about where the franchise should head. My gut tells me they should have brought in somebody completely from outside the show, potentially from Love Island or one of the other big franchises that are more contemporary. Because I think once you're working in a kind of structural situation, especially in a creative situation like making a TV show where everything is on a timed schedule, and if one thing goes wrong, it kind of messes everything up. You, I think, default to like, well, this worked, so let's just keep doing that. And if you're in that system, it's very hard for you to think like outside of the system, how it's been set up. Freeland and Gravener's relationship with the staff has been questioned, with many saying they don't know the crew. This culminated in a situation during the first night of filming season 28 of The Bachelor, that's Joey Grazia Day, where staffers were asked to wear name tags. Oh, that's brutal. That's brutal. It's basically the executive producer saying, like, we don't want to learn your names. Wear a name tag so we don't have to. I've been here a long time and we've never worn name tags before, said one source, but it didn't surprise me because they were showrunners who never showed up. They were always hiding behind the screener in their offices, so they have never really taken the time to get to know people. I just don't see how they keep their job after this article. This is brutal. The studio insider told Deadline that while crew wear physical lanyard credentials during live shows such as After the Final Rose, they do not typically wear them during episodic production. But Freeland and Gravener asked them to wear name tags for the first night of production to, quote, get to know people better and to break the ice with the new staff joining the show. Come on. That's why you make them wear name tags? I mean, you ask them their name if you want to get to know them, and you remember it. That's how it's traditionally done in the human race. In addressing allegations of toxic work environment on the Bachelor franchise run by his clients, Weinstein referenced the scrapping, I think there's a little typo there, of the Bachelorette's 2025 season. He said, quote, with The Bachelorette being put on pause, staff and crew are inevitably and understandably upset. While my clients feel badly, especially in this trying time for the industry and everyone who works in it, this should not take away from the positive changes my clients have brought to the franchise. To even suggest that my clients were somehow resistant to other points of view, acted secretly and or abusively, or threatened anyone's job is patently false and frankly absurd. My clients... I mean, by the way, these are the same people who did like the Sam Jeffries poop baby, right? They're not... It's like not only do they very probably, credibly treat their employees on the staff and the crew bad, but we see how they treat the players. They did what they did to Jen Tran. Like if that's the person, they went, both of these people, Claire Freeland and Bennett Graebner, went in that LA Times article. It came out right before Jen Tran's season. And they said in that article, we have done a bad job about how we show love stories of non-white people, and we've done a bad job at having our leads backs. That all changes with Jen Tran. We have her back. And then they end that season in one of the most egregious not having someone's back episodes I've ever seen. They wrecked her, and they did it on purpose. They made that decision. So for I mean, whatever. This is just a lawyer talking now. You know, they're professional and blah 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 blah. It's just lawyer speak. It's all lies. Where was I? Sorry. To even suggest that my clients were somehow resistant to other points of view, acted secretly and or abusively, and threatened anyone's job is patently false and frankly absurd. My clients will happily listen to any and all points of view. But at the end of the day, my clients are the ones with the new positive vision for the production. Is it positive? And there are many, many people in this industry and franchise ready, willing, and able to attest to their creativity, professionalism, and vision. I mean, this is insane. Like, where are those people? There's not one of them in this article so far. Television production can be a grueling and exhausting profession, with one positive that multiple crew members mentioned is an improvement in hours since Freeland and Graebner took over. One thing that was horrible when I started were the hours. They used to work us like 100 hours a week, said one source who has worked on the show for many years, but it's gotten much better. Freeland and Graebner do have some supporters on staff. After Deadline got in touch with Warner Brothers TV about the production environment on the Bachelor shows, we were sent 8 testimonials from staffers. One said that their experience with the pair has been, quote, positive. Quote, they are receptive to feedback, forward thinking, genuinely want the show to grow, the staffer said. I have found them open to change and willing to think about how to innovate and make the show fresh. In my time working with them, they have been consistently professional and easy to work with. All right. Who the staffer is, we don't know. Another crew member said they have been, quote, nothing short of professional, fair, and kind. I have never seen them raise their voices, behave inappropriately, or humiliate anyone. They have been consistently equanimous and inclusive throughout their tenure. A welcoming change for the franchise. After many, many years of working on this production, Claire and Bennett have brought real positive change to the work environment and the Bachelor franchise, said the worker. A third producer said their experience with Bennett Graebner as a boss has been exceptional. He's always treated me with respect and kindness. I can say the same regarding Claire Freeland. Okay, we're nearing the end here. Another producer hired by Freeland and Graebner added, quote, for the most part, this team is made up of smart, creative, talented industry professionals eager to embrace change and keep the Bachelor brand alive. There's a smaller faction of franchise veterans that feel entitled to their place on the series and see a change as a real threat. I would suggest that the latter have become complacent after years of constant renewals. This is how we've always done it. It won't cut it anymore. For some, this is a very hard pill to swallow, and Claire and Bennett have become the scapegoats for those who are no longer able to fly under the radar. Now, this paints an interesting picture that I think is kind of contradicting itself. They're essentially saying that Bennett Graebner and Claire Freeland are trying to push this show forward, trying to make some kind of real change in it. But I see it the exact opposite way. Jen Tran's season, the only thing they changed was that Jen Tran historically was the first bachelorette to propose. And that was a great creative decision, probably that did come from Freeland and Graebner. Fine, fantastic. But then they revert exactly back to the old way of doing things, which is make our lead have a nervous breakdown as often as we can. And if we can get it on live TV, that's the best version of it. So they might be sprinkling in some of these, structural changes or things that kind of like change the historical pattern of it. We've never seen a bachelorette propose before. And that is a great kind of thing. Unfortunately, it gets undercut by their reversion to the malicious producing practices that have been placed in this franchise for, again, since the beginning of the goddamn show. So I don't exactly agree with whatever this producer's trying to sell me here. Others have questioned their hiring practices. Jodie Baskerville, who was promoted to become the franchise's first black executive producer in 2021, left in early 2024. She worked on the story side of the post-production division of The Bachelor universe. Baskerville did not respond to a request for comment. 7 months and 2 show cycles after her departure, the studio hired Michael Margolis and Keely Booth. Margolis and Booth previously worked on the Canadian version of The Bachelor in Paradise, a show Freeland previously ran. The problem? Margolis is Freeland's husband. What? Wait a minute. Margolis is Freeland's husband, as Booth is an old friend. So Claire Freeland is just like, let's get my husband in here and my best friend. Everything will be fine. Warner Brothers has formal conflict of interest process in place, as well as protocols to be followed if hired. And the company said that a formal process occurred and that the pair do not report to Freeland. One of the pair I assume, lives with Freeland and is reporting to her literally every day in the marriage that they have. The hope for everyone involved is that The Bachelor can remain a hit franchise. It already is not. It remains one of ABC's signature shows, spawning new spin-offs such as The Golden Bachelor and The Golden Bachelorette all of the time. Not all of the time. Very rarely, in fact. The only spin-offs have been Bachelor Pad, which lasted 3 seasons, Bachelor in Paradise, which lasted 9, and now we're going to get a 10th. Winter Games. Listen to your heart if you want to throw that one on the pile, and then the Goldens. So it's not all of the time. I have helped people fall in love. I've been to their weddings and I have seen their babies, concluded one crew member. For me, it's more than just a job, and that's why it's so hard for me to see this kind of stuff. What an article. And I would say that even though I'm not on the crew of this show, obviously this show is a big part of my life as well, and it pains me to see it in such a place. Now, what we are seeing with this article, in my opinion, is the end of either Bennett Graebner or Claire Freeland. I think after an article like this comes out, the amount of, the casual fan maybe doesn't read this article. Clearly, I'm not the casual fan, and probably anybody watching this video is not the casual fan. But in terms of just kind of how this industry works, this is a very public attack on their ability as producers, and even a little bit of a character attack on what type of people they are and how they treat other people that they work with. To then have those people come back, I'm talking about Freeland and Graebner, to have them come back and try to run a show after this article is out there, and it's like, well, who said all this nasty shit about them? Are they now trying to headhunt within the crew to find out who said the good thing about them and who said the bad thing about them? How do you move forward with those people at the helm of this franchise with this article out there, knowing that many of the people on the crew feel they're unqualified to do this and that they've done a bad job, and the ratings are reflecting that as well? People have checked out of this franchise. I think, again, largely because of that one decision that we now learn Claire Freeland made to have Jen Tran watch back her proposal when she said, do I even have a choice? That single decision has left a hemorrhaging wound in Bachelor Nation that people are just leaving this franchise. They're going to the other franchises. Luckily, Love is Blind Season 8 right now is a dumpster fire as well. So they may come back to The Bachelor because Love is Blind ain't providing what they need. But I think Love Island USA took a big piece of the Bachelor franchise fans when they didn't air Paradise last year, and people went to watch that Love Island USA season 6, and they were like, Jesus, this is amazing. I was one of those people. And I think it's going to be hard for them to get their mojo back, especially with stuff like this. It really does seem like since the pandemic started, the franchise has just been in this downward spiral that's getting worse and worse. This article to me is kind of the culmination of it. I don't know where this is going to end, but if they keep Graebner and Freeland on as the showrunners, making all the creative decisions for where this franchise is headed next, and if one of those decisions, by the way, is to not do The Bachelorette this season for whatever reasons they think are necessary, we're in real trouble here. This could be the beginning of the end of The Bachelor. Time will tell. I will keep covering any new articles that come out to this end, but I can't thank Peter White enough for this fantastic article in this reporting. This is the first time I'm hearing that Claire Freeland is literally the person who made that decision to force Jen Tran to watch that proposal video back. And in my opinion, if you're looking for somebody to helm your franchise, to say, this is the direction we're headed, trust my creative instincts, and that is what you do with it, that person can't be doing the show anymore unless you want more of the same thing. Maybe Warner Brothers does. Are they trying to kill The Bachelor? I don't know. At any rate, thank you for joining me for this deep dive into these 2 articles. Thank you again to Peter White for writing them, and I'll be covering any more news that comes out like this as quickly as I can.